egotistical. Well after he was grown up, he would still occasionally strike his servant in moments of anger, and somewhat later, according to his English biographer, Derek Leon, he felt, quote, a frequent desire upon the slenderest provocation to slap the faces of those with whom he disagreed, unquote. One does not necessarily get rid of that kind of temperament by undergoing religious conversion, and indeed it is obvious that the illusion of having been reborn may allow one's native vices to flourish more freely than ever, though perhaps in subtler forms. Tolstoy was capable of abjuring physical violence and of seeing what this implies, but he was not capable of tolerance or humility. And even if one knew nothing of his other writings, one could deduce this tendency towards spiritual bullying from this single pamphlet. However, Tolstoy is not simply trying to rob others of a pleasure he does not share. He is doing that, but his quarrel with Shakespeare goes further. If only, Tolstoy says in effect, we would stop breeding, fighting, struggling, and enjoying, if we could get rid not only of our sins, but of everything else that binds us to the surface of the earth, including love, then the whole painful process would be over, and the kingdom of heaven would arrive. But a normal human being does not want the kingdom of heaven. He wants life on earth to continue. This is not solely because he is weak, or sinful, or anxious for a good time. Most people get a fair amount of fun out of their lives, but on balance, life is suffering, and only the very young or the very foolish imagine otherwise. Ultimately, it is the Christian attitude which is self-interested and hedonistic, since the aim is always to get away from the painful struggle of earthly life and find eternal peace in some kind of heaven or nirvana. The humanist attitude is that the struggle must continue and that death is the price of life. Quote, men must endure their going hence, even as their coming hither. Ripeness is all, unquote, which is an un-Christian sentiment. Often there is a seeming truce between the humanist and the religious believer, but in fact their attitudes cannot be reconciled. One must choose between this world and the next. And the enormous majority of human beings, if they understood the issue, would choose this world. They do make that choice when they continue working, breeding, and dying, instead of crippling their faculties in the hope of obtaining a new lease of existence elsewhere. We do not know a great deal about Shakespeare's religious beliefs, and from the evidence of his writings, it would be difficult to prove that he had any. But at any rate, he was not a saint, or a would-be saint. He was a human being, and in some ways not a very good one. It is clear, for instance, that he liked to stand well with the rich and powerful, and was capable of flattering them in the most servile way. It is also noticeably cautious, not to say cowardly. He is also noticeably cautious, not to say cowardly, in his manner of uttering unpopular opinions. Almost never does he put a subversive or skeptical remark into the mouth of a character likely to be identified with himself. Throughout his plays, the acute social critics, the people who are not taken in by accepted fallacies, are buffoons, villains, lunatics, or persons who are shamming insanity, or are in a state of violent hysteria. Lear is a play in which this tendency is particularly well remarked. It contains a great deal of veiled social criticism, a point Tolstoy misses, but it is all uttered either by the Fool, by Edgar when he is pretending to be mad, or by Lear during his bouts of real madness. In his sane moments, Lear hardly ever makes an intelligent remark, and yet the very fact that Shakespeare had to use these subterfuges shows how widely his thoughts ranged. He could not restrain himself from commenting on almost everything, although he put on a series of masks in order to do so. If one has read Shakespeare with attention, it is not easy to go a day without quoting him, because there are not many subjects of major importance that he does not discuss, or at least mention somewhere or other, in his unsystematic but illuminating way. Even the irrelevancies that litter every one of his plays, the puns and riddles, the lists of names, the scraps of reportage, like the conversation of the carriers in Henry IV, the bawdy jokes, the rescued fragments of forgotten ballads, are merely the products of excessive vitality.